Hello and welcome to The Real Beef. I'm Don Keith. I have to say, Trump's decision to federalize Washington, D.C.'s law enforcement and deploy the National Guard represents the strong America First leadership that has been sorely missing under the Biden administration. For too long, Democrat-controlled policies in the nation's capital have allowed crime to spiral out of control, turning the streets of our historic capital into basically a war zone. Trump's invocation of the Home Rule Act to bring in federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and Secret Service isn't overreach. It's a necessary intervention to protect American citizens and restore law and order. This move echoes the successful crackdowns we've seen in conservative-led states, where tough-on-crime approaches have yielded tangible results. Unlike the soft-on-crime agendas pushed by progressives that prioritize criminals over victims. And to understand the urgency of Trump's actions, one need only to look at the alarming rise in D.C.'s crime rates over the past decade, particularly during the Biden-Harris administration. Under Democratic leadership, violent crime in the district surged dramatically, fueled by defund the police rhetoric and lenient prosecution policies. For instance, homicides in D.C. climbed from 116 in 2018 to a staggering 274 in 2023, marking a 136% increase in just 5 years. This spike wasn't isolated. Overall, violent crime rates in D.C. increased by more than 30% between 2019 and 2023, outpacing many other major cities and contributing to the district's status as having one of the highest per capita murder rates in the nation. Robberies and carjackings exploded as well. In 2023 alone, D.C. reported over 900 carjackings, a nearly 100% jump from 2020 levels, while robberies hit a 15-year high of more than 3,500 incidents. Now, compare this to earlier years under stronger enforcement. In 2010, violent crime totaled around 4,800 incidents, but by 2016, it had dipped below 4,000 thanks to more robust policing, only to reverse course under progressive policies that handcuffed law enforcement. Now, of course, the pro-criminal crowds from the left cry federal overreach and invoke the Posse Comitatus Act, but these are the same voices that turned a blind eye as D.C.'s crime wave claimed innocent lives and eroded public safety. Trump's deployment is targeted and temporary, aimed at high crime areas where local efforts have failed miserably. Already, preliminary reports suggest a deterrent effect, with arrests surging and communities breathing a sigh of relief. This contrasts sharply with blue cities like Chicago or San Francisco, where crime remains rampant under Democrat rule. Chicago's homicide rate, for example, hovered around 25 per 100,000 in 2023, compared to D.C.'s 40 per 100,000 peak that same year. Trump's approach aligns with conservative principles, prioritizing victims, empowering law enforcement, and using federal resources wisely to fix what locals want. This takeover isn't about power. It's about saving lives and proving that strong leadership can turn the tide against chaos. But this isn't the only area where President Trump continues to demonstrate strong leadership. Just look at his economic policies. His strategic extension of the U.S.-China trade truce is really a win for American workers and the economy. It's a masterful display of economic negotiation where he's extended the 90-day truce on escalating tariffs and export controls with China, delaying further hikes while securing record-high tariff revenues that bolster America's fiscal strength. His critics may call it a retreat, but I don't think so. It's really a calculated pause in the trade war Trump initiated to protect American jobs, intellectual property, and manufacturing from Beijing's predatory practices. Unlike the weak-kneed globalism of past administrations, Trump's America First tariffs have forced China to the table, generating billions in revenue that can fund infrastructure, defense, and tax cuts for hardworking families. This extension allows time for deeper negotiations without surrendering leverage, proving once again that Trump's tough stance delivers results where others failed. The proof is in the numbers. July's tariff revenues hit an unprecedented $29 billion, shattering previous records and highlighting the effectiveness of Trump's policies. To put this in perspective, consider historical comparisons from other tariff years. Under the Obama administration, annual customs duties averaged just $33 billion from 2010 to 2016, with peaks barely reaching $35 billion in 2016. Hardly enough to offset China's unfair trade surpluses that drained American factories. Trump's first-term trade actions changed that dramatically. By 2019, amid the initial trade war, revenues surged to $70.8 billion annually, more than double the pre-Trump average, as tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods took hold. Trump's return has pushed monthly collections to new heights. July's $29 billion alone exceeds the entire quarterly averages of the early 2010s, which hovered around 8 to 10 billion. Forecasts now project 2025 annual revenues nearing $100 billion, a testament to how Trump's tariffs not only punish cheaters, but also refill America's coffers. So don't listen to the liberals crying that tariffs are a tax on consumers, because the data tells a different story. These revenues have helped to offset trade deficits, with U.S. exports to China rebounding in key sectors like agriculture, where soybean sales recovered post-2018 dips. Moreover, comparisons to free trade eras show the folly of inaction. Under NAFTA, things like NAFTA and the WTO rules pre-Trump. Manufacturing jobs hemorrhaged by millions while China's GDP ballooned at America's expense. Trump's truce extension really eases short-term pressures on businesses while maintaining pressure on Xi Jinping, potentially leading to fair deals that bring jobs home. This is economic patriotism at its finest, really, generating wealth, deterring adversaries, and proving that strength, not surrender, wins the day. And speaking of strength, yet another example of that is Trump's scheduled August 15 summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska that exemplifies the bold deal-making diplomacy that we voted for, a far cry from the endless wars and blank check foreign aid of the Biden era. I also like the way he chose Alaska for the summit as a sort of symbolic nod to the historic U.S.-Russia ties and America's Arctic interests. But this is classic Trump. He's always positioned himself as the peacemaker who can end the Ukraine conflict, saving American taxpayers billions and preventing further escalation. So I guess we'll see what happens. They're calling it a sort of feel-out meeting where Trump plans to gauge Putin's willingness for compromise, including potential land swap proposals that kind of underscore Trump's commitment to realism over idealism. Negotiate from strength, protect U.S. interests, and avoid entangling alliances that drain our resources. And Trump has some pretty good cards to play here. Sources indicate discussions will center on ending the war, with Trump warning that U.S. military aid to Ukraine, which is already topping $175 billion since 2022, could ease if no deal materializes. This leverages America's position as Russia has seized significant territory, controlling about 18% of Ukraine, while Ukrainian forces struggle despite massive Western support. Now compare this to Biden's approach. Under his watch, the conflict dragged on for over 3 years, costing U.S. lives indirectly through proxy involvement and inflating global energy prices. Gasoline averaged over $5 per gallon in 2022 peaks versus today's stabilized rates under Trump. They're also saying that Trump's prior sanctions ultimatum on August 8th reportedly softened Putin's demands, paving the way for talks that could include territorial concessions in exchange for neutrality guarantees. It really echoes the same kind of successful conservative diplomacy we saw under Reagan's arms deals with the Soviets. European leaders may whine about excluding Ukraine, but conservatives know that true peace requires a direct leader-to-leader engagement, not committee-style dithering. Now, Zelensky says he rejects the idea of land swaps, but he's ignoring reality, where Russian advances have claimed over 1,000 square miles in 2024 alone. Trump's summit could slash U.S. aid costs, projecting a $60 billion annually under Biden. This would actually free funds for things like domestic priorities or border security. And we all know there's no way Ukraine can win this thing without America. But I want to move on across to the pond now, because there's really a lot going on over there, starting with immigration. The Labor government's abject failure on the Channel migrant crisis is a profound betrayal of Britain's sovereignty, security, and storied heritage as a nation that has always defended its borders with unyielding resolve. Since Keir Starmer's administration took the helm following the July 2024 election, over 50,271 illegal migrants have flooded across the English Channel in flimsy small boats, a shameful milestone that exposes Labour's spineless policies and their contempt for the rule of law. This isn't mere mismanagement, it's a surrender of Britain's independence, allowing criminal smuggling networks to exploit UK shorelines at a rate of one arrival every 11 minutes on average, resulting in a staggering 48% surge in crossings compared to the same period in the previous year. British patriots rooted in love for country and tradition see this as an assault on the very essence of British identity, where unchecked migration dilutes the culture, strains public services, and endangers communities that have preserved their way of life for centuries. The crisis has escalated to the point where, as of early August 2025, more than 25,436 migrants have crossed, in the year to date, marking a 49% increase over the equivalent period in 2024, when the annual total stood at around 37,000. Even more alarmingly, the 10,000 crossing mark was reached by the end of April 2025, over a month earlier than in the prior year, signaling an accelerating trend under Labour's watch. And delving deeper into the statistics paints an even grimmer picture of escalation. Just in the week leading up to August 12th, crossings included peaks like 474 arrivals in 8 boats on a single day, pushing the total past the 50,000 threshold since Labour assumed power. This contrasts sharply with the more controlled periods under previous conservative-led efforts, where international partnerships and deterrent schemes like Rwanda helped curb the flow, though really imperfectly, if you ask some folks. They at least slowed the tide to below 30,000 in some years. Now, with Labor scrapping such measures and offering vague promises of smashing the gangs, the reality is a booming industry for traffickers, really, profiting millions while British taxpayers foot the bill for housing and processing, estimated at $5 billion annually in asylum costs. Public services in coastal areas like Kent and Sussex are overwhelmed with asylum hotels repurposed at a rate that has led to local councils reporting a 20 to 30% strain on budgets for education, healthcare, and housing. The British people are seething with really justified frustration. Their patriotic spirit has been ignited by the sight of these asylum hotels overrun and local services buckling under the pressure of this invasion. Protests in coastal towns and beyond reflect a deep-seated anger at Labour's excuses, blaming weather, global factors, or legacy issues, while ignoring how their amnesty signals an abandonment of deterrence that have really emboldened traffickers. Communities feel unsafe with reports of increased tensions and incidents at migrant accommodations rising by 15% in the past year alone. In contrast to eras when Britain stood firm against external threats, upholding values of self-reliance and national pride, today's crossings have hit unprecedented highs, with 2025 surpassing the 45,000 peak of 2022. Polls reveal overwhelming discontent, with surveys showing that 65 to 70% of Britons now demand tougher border controls, and approval for Starmer's handling of migration has plummeted to below 30% in recent months. This disaster has awakened a patriotic backlash, reminding us that true conservatism means defending the homeland with the fierce determination that built an empire and preserved freedom, not capitulating to progressive ideals that prioritize outsiders over native citizens. But labor isn't just bad on immigration. I mean, take a look at the most recent unemployment numbers. Labor's economic policies represent a catastrophic assault on Britain's prosperity, self-reliance, and the hardworking ethos that has defined the country for generations. Unemployment has soared to a 4-year high of 4.7% in the April to June 2025 period, a grim testament to how Starmer's socialist leanings, imposing burdensome taxes, mandatory wage hikes, and escalating energy costs have crippled businesses and eroded the free market foundations that true conservatives hold sacred. This rate is up sharply from 4.2% a year ago and even higher than the 3.9% pre-pandemic benchmark, marking the highest level since the 3 months ending in August of 2021. Job vacancies have plunged by 44,000 in the 3 months to July, reaching a low of 718,000, the fewest openings since April of 2021, while payrolls have contracted for 6 consecutive months, shedding 26,000 jobs between May and June alone, and totaling a loss of 149,000 over the past year. This isn't an inevitable downturn that they want you to believe. It's the direct result of labor's anti-growth agenda, which punishes enterprise and favors state intervention over individual initiative, betraying the patriotic ideal of a thriving independent Britain where hard work is rewarded and opportunity abounds. Expanding on the data reveals an even broader economic downturn under labor. The number of unemployed individuals aged 16 and over has climbed to 1.67 million, an increase of approximately 120,000 from the previous year, with rises across all age groups and sectors, particularly in retail and hospitality, which accounted for over 80% of recent job losses. Economic inactivity also remains high at around 9.4 million people, driven by long-term sickness and early retirements, further straining the welfare system and contradicting the conservative value of personal responsibility. While wage growth persists at around 5%, this is overshadowed by persistent inflation and cost pressures, leading to real-term squeezes for families. Average weekly earnings rose by 4.9%, excluding bonuses, but when adjusted for inflation, gains are minimal at best. Businesses cite a raft of cost pressures, including labor's proposed inheritance tax reforms targeting farmland and pensions, which threaten rural economies and could lead to further layoffs in agriculture and related industries. Frustration really grips the British populace as families endure a cost of living crisis amplified by these job losses, with 3.7 million sidelined by economic inactivity, a sharp betrayal of British industriousness and resilience, harking back to the Victorian era's entrepreneurial spirit or the post-war boom under more Britain First style policies. Unlike periods when conservative values of low taxes and deregulations fostered job creation, keeping unemployment below 4% pre-labor and creating over 2 million jobs in the 2010s, the current regime's threats of higher employer national insurance and bonus cuts are driving firms to freeze hiring or relocate, stifling the entrepreneurial spirit that built Britain's global standing. Surveys capture this patriotic outrage, with over 55% blaming labor for deepening hardships and business confidence dropping to their lowest in 2 years, as reported by groups like the Resolution Foundation. This economic negligence has sparked a wave of discontent, underscoring that labor's failures threaten the very fabric of a self-sufficient nation where true conservatism champions free enterprise, fiscal prudence, and the dignity of work for every Briton. But if you want to see just how fed up the British people are in real time, look no further than this massive petition for a snap election, now exceeding 680,000 signatures in just 10 days. A resounding rebuke to Labour's disastrous governance, which has trampled on Britain's democratic traditions and national pride. The people are fed up because of Keir Starmer breaking pledges on everything from borders to the economy, revealing a government adrift and disconnected from the values of honesty, accountability, and love of country that have sustained Britain's democracy since the Magna Carta. Surging toward the signature levels of historic petitions like the 2019 Brexit one that garnered over 6 million, or the more recent 2024 call that hit 2 million, this movement signals a profound crisis of legitimacy as Labour's radical shifts alienate the very people they swore to serve. Hosted on the official Parliament website, the petition has already crossed key thresholds, surpassing 10,000 for a government response and 100,000 for potential debate in the House of Commons, forcing ministers to address the growing clamor despite their dismissals. The details of this grassroots uprising highlight its rapid momentum and broad appeal. Launched amid mounting scandals and over migration surges and economic woes, the petition gained nearly 60,000 signatures in its first few days, accelerating to over 600,000 by the middle of this month. It explicitly calls for an immediate election, citing Labour's betrayal on pre-election promises such as halting small boat crossings and the terrible economy we've already discussed. This isn't partisan squabbling. It's a defense of British heritage against a regime that prioritizes ideology over the common good. Polls also echo this sentiment, with Labour's approval ratings dipping below 35% in recent surveys, and over 60% of respondents in a YouGov poll expressing regret over the election outcome amid rising costs and perceived policy U-turns. Even global figures have weighed in, amplifying the petition's reach and highlighting how Labour's excuses, dismissing it as non-binding, fall flat against demands for transparent leadership. This petition isn't fringe. It's the voice of a betrayed populace drawing support from diverse demographics, including rural voters hit by tax hikes and urban workers facing job insecurity. Labour's reign has ignited a call to arms, proving that when the nation's soul is at stake, the people will rise to reclaim it through the ballot box, which will, restore the conservative principles of integrity and national unity that have long defined Great Britain. So I hope they work all these things out. They have a lot going on in Great Britain right now, and America stands with them. So, I guess we'll just see what happens with this petition. But I think the British people are pretty pissed off right now. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been The Real Beef, and I'm your host, Don Keith. We'll see you next time.